Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into one of the most profound, honestly existential mysteries of human existence. What biologically happens to our brains during that transition between life and death? You know, for centuries, we've thought of death as just this instant in time. Boom, you're gone. But modern neuroscience is actually revealing that the boundary between life and death is far less like a brick wall and much more like this weird biological twilight zone. So let's just get right into it. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote, "Death is not a life event. It is not a fact of the world." Now, he definitely meant this in a philosophical sense, but it perfectly sets up our whole premise for today. The source material we're looking at reveals that our traditional understanding of death, treating it as this instantaneous, totally irreversible event, might actually be fundamentally wrong on a biological level. It forces us to ask, so when exactly do we die? I really want you to challenge your assumption about that exact moment for a second. We typically think, right, it's when the heart takes its last beat, or maybe when you stop breathing. But as you'll see, the biological reality of what is happening inside your brain when the oxygen runs out is this incredibly suspenseful, highly complex, and surprisingly structured process. Section 1. Redefining the moment of death, escaping the event model. To really understand this, we first need to look at how medicine is trying to escape what's known as the event model. If we contrast our two current legal and medical definitions of death, on the one side we have the cardiac death model. This is where the very last heartbeat is the single event that defines death. On the other side is the brain death model, which was introduced back in 1968, where a catastrophic brain injury resulting in a flatline and a coma is the defining event, even if the heart is being artificially kept beating. But notice how both of these paradigms rely on this totally outdated all-or-nothing event idea. They basically treat dying like flipping off a light switch. Section 2. Entering the twilight zone, a chronological journey. But the research shows dying isn't a switch at all. It's a gradual physiological journey right through that twilight zone we mentioned, a state literally stuck between life and irreversible death. If we map this out chronologically, we can see exactly what happens in a mammalian brain when the oxygen stops flowing. At 10 to 20 seconds, there's a fast activity surge. By 30 to 60 seconds, the brain enters an isoelectric flatline. And then, between 50 to 120 seconds, we see something intense called the wave of death. Let's break those stages down a bit. First up, we have what's called the paradoxical surge. Now, you would logically think that an oxygen-starved brain would instantly just power down to conserve energy, right? But it does the exact opposite. Within seconds of the oxygen stopping, the brain transiently bursts with this high-frequency gamma activity. Those are the brain waves we usually associate with deep focus and really high-level processing. It's an incredibly energy-demanding state. It's actually similar to the brain waves seen during highly conscious states, or even epileptic seizures. And these surface brain recordings brilliantly illustrate that surge. You can clearly see this massive burst of high-frequency electrical activity right there. But as you might guess, it doesn't last. As the brain's oxygen plummets, this chaotic firing gives way to what neurologists call the isoelectric state. That's the flat line you're seeing, an absolutely eerie silence where spontaneous cortical activity completely vanishes. The brain is quiet, but it is not dead yet. Section 3. The wave of death, the final countdown. See, this flatline is really just a countdown to a dramatic physical turning point that happens roughly 1 to 2 minutes after the brain's electrical activity goes silent. This turning point is scientifically known as spreading depolarization, or much more ominously, the wave of death. So the absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that your brain cells are constantly using energy to keep electrically charged particles, ions, separated by a barrier. When the oxygen stops, those oxygen-starved neurons desperately draw on their very last energy reserves. And when those finally run out, the ionic barriers catastrophically fail, releasing a massive wave of electrochemical energy straight across the brain. Take a look at this. Notice that massive electrical spike completely disrupting the flatline? Researchers from the Charité Universitätsmedizin in Berlin were continuously monitoring patients with fatal brain injuries, and they observed this exact massive wave occurring in dying human brains. It literally marks the loss of stored energy and the sudden onset of toxic processes. And the physical toll this takes on the brain is just extreme. Compared to healthy neurons, these oxygen-deprived or anoxic neurons undergo some incredibly bizarre physical changes during this wave. Because that ion balance we talked about is destroyed, water just rushes into the cells. The neurons physically swell up by a staggering 37%. This swelling shrinks the space between the cells drastically, which traps energy and rapidly increases the brain tissue's electrical resistance. Section 4. Reversing the irreversible. Resuscitation. But here is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. This wave of death, this silence, the swelling, it actually only marks a countdown. Up to a certain point, these toxic processes can still be reversed if circulation is restored. If oxygenated blood is reintroduced through resuscitation, the brain can generate a mirrored sequence called the wave of resuscitation, which you can actually see right here. It's an incredible new real-time biomarker. When this wave appears, it means the neuron's electrical properties are collectively recovering. The brain is actively repolarizing and pulling itself back from the brink. And honestly, even more astonishing is the timeline here. A major study led by researchers at NYU called the AWARE-2 study found that up to an hour after their hearts had stopped, patients revived by CPR showed signs of electrical recovery. Yeah, you heard that right. Even an hour into the resuscitation effort, brain activity could return to normal or at least near normal levels. The brain is far, far more resilient in this twilight zone than we ever imagined. Section 5. Consciousness at the end. The mind survives. So how does all this cold, hard neuroscience translate to the subjective, deeply human experience of dying? Does the mind actually survive this twilight zone? Well, that AWARE study gives us a really powerful number to consider, 4 in 10. 4 out of every 10 cardiac arrest survivors in their study recalled some degree of consciousness during CPR. Even though these patients appeared completely unresponsive on the outside, literally without a heartbeat, their minds were actively experiencing the event. And the hard data absolutely backs up their stories. Using brainwave monitors during CPR, researchers detected massive spikes across the board. We're talking gamma, delta, theta, alpha, and beta frequencies, the whole shebang. These aren't just random twitches or muscle spasms. These specific frequencies are deeply, fundamentally associated with higher mental function, conscious thought, and memory processing. The brain isn't just barely surviving. In some ways, it's hyperactive. To explain this, scientists have proposed what's known as the disinhibition hypothesis. The theory is that in our normal waking life, the brain uses inhibitory systems, basically cognitive brakes, to filter out excess information so we can just function day to day. But as the dying brain flatlines, it removes these natural braking systems. This process of disinhibition suddenly opens up access to a person's entire stored memory bank. Survivors consistently report highly lucid experiences, separating from their bodies and observing their entire lives, evaluated really clearly from a moral perspective. And researchers are quick to note, these are not hallucinations or dreams. They are a distinct, shared phenomenon of death. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If dying is not just a single event, but a complex, reversible process where the brain removes its filters to grant us this hyper-lucid review of our existence, what is the evolutionary purpose of this final phenomenon? And what does it ultimately reveal about the true nature of human consciousness? It's a profound mystery that absolutely asks us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the final moments of life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and keep questioning.